Hello everybody, this is Zaxter99. Welcome to Drive Home number 8. I want to go ahead and talk to you guys tonight, 2:05 in the morning. Just got off work. It's late. This is Drive Home number 8. So I want to talk to you guys about fears in life. What scares you? You guys can put down in the comments down below. Please don't be afraid to share what it is that scares you the most. Is it something in your daily life? Is it something that hasn't happened yet that you think will happen to you or might happen to you? Maybe if you're a kid, you're scared of monsters or zombies or, something like that. And if you're an adult, go ahead and open up and share, what was the scariest movie you ever watched down below. So a couple of different things to talk about. What are you afraid of most at this point in your life? And I think the thing that's always scared me the most as an adult is, I don't know. For me, I think my biggest fear is getting old and being alone, but not only getting old and being really feeble and fragile and being alone or being lonely. I think something that scares me even more is looking back and having a feeling like I never made a difference to anybody. I never made a real difference in anybody's life. That maybe I'm not important to even my kids, or my family. I think that is a real fear. To feel like you could be old and you've lived a whole life and nobody gives a damn about you. Maybe your own kids and your family that's still alive, hate you or despise you or just don't give a damn about you. And so not only the loneliness that you might feel, like if your wife or your partner dies or leaves you, but just being alone and then having a feeling like nobody that you've ever been close to is in your life. Could you imagine how that would feel? And I think the sad thing is for a lot of our older people out there, maybe they have been married 50 or 60 years, but now they're alone, and they go every day, and maybe they have kids, or maybe they have some family out there, but they don't want to feel like they're, intruding on their family. They don't want to bother people. They know people, maybe they have kids, but they know their kids have a busy life because their kids have kids of their own and jobs and everything. And can you imagine how bad it must feel for all these people that live in a nursing home that have nobody that comes to visit them? And maybe they have people in the nursing home that are mean or rude to them or even spit on them or do rude things to them. And the loneliness that they feel, they never see anybody that cares, nobody that truly loves them. That to me is definitely a huge fear. To be in that kind of an isolated situation, to feel like you don't matter to anybody and that nothing you do or can do means anything to anybody. That would be an awful feeling. And if you haven't done this, if you're an adult and you've never been in a nursing home, I challenge you to just walk in a random nursing home near your house and just walk down the halls, and maybe peer inside a couple of the rooms or whatever. I can't even explain in a nursing home how sad and depressing the feeling is you get just walking down the hallway of a nursing home and seeing feeble old people, in wheelchairs, and it's very, very, very sad. I mean, it's enough to put you in tears, even if you don't even know anybody there. So that, to me, is definitely one of my biggest fears. To not only get old and feel like nobody gives a damn anymore about me at that age, but to look back. Hopefully you have enough of a memory at that age to look back, but to look back on your life and think you never really mattered to anybody. That nothing you've done in your life has been significant or made a difference in the world. To have a combination of that kind of loneliness, that kind of depression, that kind of isolation from the living world, and then also to look back on your life when you were younger and have a feeling like you never did anything that made a difference in anybody's life, that to me is my biggest fear. To have that feeling. And maybe at this point I have made a difference in a lot of people's lives, but that doesn't mean that in 30 years from now that I'm not going to be in a nursing home and have that feeling. That doesn't mean that I may not be lonely in 30 years or 40 years and look back on my life and feel like I never made a difference. So even if what you feel is completely different than the truth, right? What you feel is all the truth that you're going to know at that point. The only thing that's going to matter is what you feel, what you remember, and how you remember your life. So I just think that would be an awful, awful feeling to feel like that. And to be that lonely. And to have no family or kids or anything that care about me. So that's my biggest fear. And I want to know what you guys, let me know if your fears are similar to mine down in the comments below. Or maybe your fear is completely different. Maybe you have a huge fear of simply dying. It's not being alone. Hell, I would take dying about any way I could imagine over living for years and years and years with the kind of feeling like I just talked about, with that kind of loneliness. I'd rather die. But maybe for some of you, you fear death itself. Others of you, your biggest fear maybe, losing the love of your life, or maybe the person you're married to is going to divorce you, or maybe you fear losing your job, or, there's a million different fears that can be very, very, real to you. You don't need any validation. It's a valid fear if you feel it, whatever it is. Maybe your biggest fear is, your hands aren't clean enough, and so you wash your hands 20 times a day. Maybe that's the biggest fear that impacts you the most on a daily basis. If that's the case, let me know down in the comments below, whatever it is, Let me know. Now also, to go with that, what is your biggest fear as a kid? What was the scariest movie you ever watched, And how is it different from your biggest fear as an adult? Now, people are going to laugh, especially if they've ever seen the movie, right? But I still remember as a kid, I remember my parents. My parents were, I must have been, I know I still lived down in Texas. We hadn't lived in Idaho yet, and I believe I was either 5 or 6 years old. It was a couple years before we moved up here to Idaho. And all I remember was my parents were like making out or getting it on. I mean, they weren't naked or nothing like that, but I think they were trying to make out or something, on the couch. And this is back in the 70s. So we had one of those little, 20-inch old school tube televisions or whatever. And my dad had found a movie for me to watch And I can't remember, maybe him and my mom went back to the bedroom or whatever. And me and my little sister, who was only 1 or 2 at the time, she might have been in a crib. I don't know. She wasn't very old either. So she might have been 2 and I might have been 6. That sounds about right. And we stayed there, and my dad put on a movie. He's like, oh, Zach, you're going to love this movie. You know, I watched this years ago or whatever. And so at the time, it's probably 1978, probably 20 years after this movie was made. And he put on the old original Steve McQueen movie, The Blob. And if you've ever seen the 1958 original, The Blob, I'm not talking about the 1988 Kevin, whatever his name is, Kevin McGillan or something like that. It's not that one. It's the old 1958 Steve McQueen original classic, The Blob. Pretty good little horror flick for its time. You know, it's a movie about basically an asteroid that hits Earth and has what looks like a kind of a blob of jelly inside of it. And it's the Blob. It's actually a blob of, you know, red colored, it looks like grape jelly that rolls around and eats people and gets bigger and bigger as it eats people. But back then, back in the 70s, movies weren't like they are today. You know, movies weren't graphic and bloody and all this stuff like they are today. And especially movies on TV, you know, on regular TV, like this movie played. And my parents were back in the bedroom or not watching. I don't know if they were on the couch or whatever, but wherever they were, my eyes were glued to that damn television set. They were glued to that old man going out there with a stick and opening up that asteroid and that thing getting on his hand, that blob, and Steve McQueen almost running him over as the old man runs across the road, and him taking him into the doctor's office. And that was the best part of the whole movie, was like the first 20 minutes, the first 25 minutes, where the blob gets on the old man's hand, it eats his arm as the doctor's trying to figure out what's going on, and then he calls in a nurse to help him, and that blob eats the whole old man completely, and then it's rolling around on the floor, and the nurse ends up getting scared and knocking the power out, and it eats her in like a split second while the doctor's getting his gun, and then the doctor sees it in the shadows and it's dark because she knocked the power out, and then the thing eats the doctor. You never really saw a whole lot of special effects or anything like that, just enough, you know, to make your imagination work overtime in that movie. But man, that was the first 20-30 minutes of that movie is by far the best. The whole movie is only like an hour and 20 minutes long. And that movie, when I was 6 years old, scared the living bejesus out of me. I mean, I was scared of the Blob the rest of that night and for weeks after that, you know. And then after that, because it was so scary, it became my favorite movie for years. And we didn't have VCRs and everything like that back then. You couldn't go out and buy a Blu-ray or a DVD movie back then. So my mom would always buy that weekly TV guide. And every week when she'd buy that TV guide, I would flip through every page of that TV guide every day, every week, looking for one of the old channels like TBS or WGN or one of the cable channels to have the Blob. And every week I would be depressed and bummed out because the damn Blob wasn't coming on that week. And my mom the next week would buy another TV guide and I'd look through it. And it turned out it seemed like they only showed that movie about once a year. And it always came on at like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning or really late on a Friday night or something on like WGN or TBS or maybe one of the local channels would have it. And every time either my mom or my dad or I'd find in the TV guide, I would get so freaking excited. I'd invite friends over to watch it with me. And man, that was my favorite movie for years. Probably till I was 12 or 13 years old. And, you know, back in those 12 or 13 years, my parents say that I've watched the movie 400 times. But that's not possible because it only really showed about once a year. And we didn't have a VCR or anything like that until I got to an age where, you know, that movie never really interested in me anymore. But I know one night I had one of my best friends that was supposed to come over and watch it with me, and The Blob was supposed to come on at like 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and my friend that came over fell asleep, and they delayed the movie because I think a baseball game or something like that went too late or whatever, and the movie didn't come on till like 1 or 2 in the morning. And we still was in Texas, so I was probably only 7 years old at the time this happened. And maybe I was 8. We might have been in Idaho. I don't remember. But anyway, I wasn't that old still. And that movie came on at like 2 o'clock in the morning. And my friend had fallen asleep, and I couldn't get him up. And I was scared to death of watching that movie by myself. And I remember I went and woke my dad up. I'm like, Dad, will you please watch this movie? I'm scared. And my dad got up at like 2 o'clock in the morning after working all day, and he sat there and watched it with me. And man, I love my dad to pieces for doing that, because I really was still scared of that damn blob of grape jelly out there rolling around on the street coming to get me. So that is probably going to crack a lot of you up, but that is part of my life, part of my childhood. You could even ask my parents and my sisters and everything like that. The Blob is definitely part of me and part of my childhood. Nowadays, movies and everything like that. Nowadays, my son, at 7 years old was watching The Walking Dead, and it barely even fazed him. So my son nowadays is definitely a lot tougher than I ever was when I was a kid. He just sees, he's influenced by so much more video games and everything like that. He's just seen so much more. And, it just takes a lot more to affect these kids today than it did back in the 70s when I was a kid. But let me know what your favorite scary movie was when you were a kid. Let me know what your greatest fear is now that you're older. And let me, notice the difference when you're actually commenting down below. Or thinking about it, even if you don't comment, think about what that difference is. How big of a difference it is. It's kind of interesting. But I'd love to see your comments. Be sure you rate this video. Be sure you comment down below your greatest fear now that you're older, and what was your scariest movie or your biggest fear as a kid. Love to read those comments. Be sure you post them down below. Be sure you rate my video, and be sure you subscribe. This is Zaxter99. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you in the next one. Take care.